All right, more tonight on The Voice, with reports today that Labor backbenchers are increasingly spooked by how badly the polling has turned out against the government. Labor Senator, veteran Helen Polley said if she was a betting person today, it wouldn't get up in Tasmania. That's where her seat is. Brisbane MP Graham Perrott said door knocking in many suburbs had yielded more of a no response than a yes response from residents. Another senior Labor source said support in states like Queensland was lower than they had expected it to be. Now, their solution? Well, a better effort, says Labor, from taxpayer-funded information campaigns. Hardly the news my viewers want to hear. But despite the polling and there's growing unrest amongst his colleagues, well, the Prime Minister is indeed doubling down. Joining me to discuss this and more, Editor-at-Large at The Australia, the brilliant Paul Kelly. Paul, thank you as always. Welcome to the show. This polling's bad. I'd now regard it as a settled trend across a whole mixed bag of pollsters. Now, that's not good, and if I was in the PM's office, it would worry me. It's not just Newspoll, as I said, it's a raft of pollsters coming out with this tracking against where the government wants it to be. You've got advocates like Linda Burney, she's not cutting through. Those that do cut through, like pay the rent activist Thomas Mayo, well, he's doing more harm than good. I know there's big money to be spent from the yes camp, but we're seeing very little conversion of that soft vote over to the yes camp. Give me your take on what we're seeing play out here, Paul.
I think what's happened here, Peter, is that the Albanese government misjudged this issue, and it's proved to be much more difficult than what they anticipated. We've seen the news. We've seen this week's Newspoll showing the no case ahead of the yes case, and it's interesting to see what the Prime Minister said about that. He said the yes case had to make a greater effort to explain the referendum. But I think that's the problem. The more people find out about the referendum, the more I think there is unease and suspicion and opposition to the proposal, because this is a contentious political proposal, and this is the core problem. The government is reluctant to explain the proposal over the last several months because it's been concerned that explaining the proposal could be a negative. Well, I think that's right. But of course, given where the polls are, the government is now saying, well, we've got no option but to try and explain the proposal and put some effective spin on it. I think it's going to be very hard for the government to do that, because the essence of the proposal is complex, it's complicated, it's contentious.
Yeah, all that means, Paul, that the PM's caught on a barbed wire fence. I mean, he can't go that way and explain it, and he can't stay where he is and not explain it. So how does he progress? Because we're likely to vote in October. We're almost now in July. He hasn't got a hell of a lot of time.
Well, I think they're going to rely on goodwill. I think they're going to rely on the sentiment of the Australian community, its willingness to support Indigenous peoples, its concern about the closing the gap efforts and so on. But the problem the government's got was exposed very much last week in the Parliament when we saw the Minister, Linda Burney, actually say in relation to Australia Day that the Voice would not give advice on Australia Day. Well, the Voice is perfectly entitled to give advice on Australia Day, and in that sense the Australia Day issue was a symbol of the government's confusion, where it's trying to play down or disguise what the Voice can actually do. Well, if the government is either confused or misleading about the nature of the Voice, then it's very hard to see how this referendum will succeed, and hard to see how the trend towards the no case can be reversed.